This is Drop Tent Media Network.
Seriously, Dad?
Seriously, Dad? Two father comedians out of Philadelphia. Seriously, Dad?
Dad? Seriously?
Dad?
Seriously? Seriously?
Yo, welcome back. Season 2. Seriously Dead.
Yeah. And Steve Young, that's a pretty popular name, whether you're the quarterback or even when you do a Google search, there's a ton of Steve Youngs. That's a pretty common name.
The one who I wrote for Leno, he wrote for Letterman, and we would get our checks mixed up all the time. So the Steve Young, and people would say to me, I love your Simpsons, and I go, yeah, I love it too.
Me too. That's great. That's awesome. No, I'm glad. I mean, I don't forget where we met originally. Was it at either the Comedy Cabaret or maybe
I know where.
The Kelly Center?
No. Actually, in Delaware.
I know, Delaware. It was a benefit for cancer, maybe.
I think it was. Yes, it's for cancer. Yes,
because it was Belinda Clear, I believe, and then it was you, me, Chanel, Renee. I believe was on. It was great. It was a great show. I was very nervous. I think it was the first time I was doing not a comedy club spot or not I was
a real stage.
And it was a real stage. It was, yeah. And that was the first time I got to see your act, and I knew. So I was like, it was fun to see you take some of my stuff and then create something from that. I thought that was, I hadn't seen.
I forgot. I just remember. I think you were talking about your parents, and I said, "Give me some more information on that." Because I thought that was perfect for
there, because you did some kind of menage a mom, or there was some kind of really funny line.
Whatever it was, I knew. There are certain things when you're writing that you're sitting there going, "I'm not sure. Maybe if I'm on a run, people will buy it." Then there's other ones that go, "I can't wait to do this one because it's just a guarantee."
That's funny you said that, because I was thinking about your process as I was watching you when we were in Newtown recently, and I was just like, that makes sense. Because I know when I write bits, I'm like, oh, this bit is if I'm on a running start, I can throw this out and it'll be fine. But if I'm at a dead stop, I'm not going to use this bit. So that makes sense. That's cool. Yeah, so that makes sense. So we met at that benefit. And I think that was the first time you and I connected after, because I think I also did some jokes about my daughter who was autistic, and I remember us sort of bonding a little bit over that as well. So it'd be fun for us to talk a little bit more about that too.
Yeah, sure.
The concept of you being a writer and a comedian like that, to me, the whole comedy thing was so new for me. It came later in life. So seeing this and hearing from people who it was a career path for, was it something that you always did you in terms of getting out of college was oh, I'm going to be a writer. That's what I'm doing.
Well, I got out of college a number of times. Actually 4 different times I got out of college. Oh, no, they asked me to leave. I actually flunked out of 4 different colleges without ever getting a single credit. I got a senatorial scholarship to Temple University, and I flunked out the first semester. So they said, well, you can go to our night school. Nobody fails night school. And I took that as a challenge. And I flunked out. Then I went to Trenton Junior College and flunked out in the first semester. Then I went in the Army, and after 3 months, they said, you could leave if you want. And then I went to Mercer County Community College, which was really Trenton Junior. But I figured, they changed the name. They'll probably forget about me. And I flunked out of that too. And that was basically it, except for the interesting thing. Temple University asked me to teach there, which I did for a couple semesters.
What? So wait, so how does that because as a teacher myself, I'm because sometimes I'll have kids in a class. Was it just that you just weren't engaged and you were just I'm not going to go to class. I'm not doing the work.
I have always thought that I have attention deficit disorder. I write books. I never read them. So there's a lot of mistakes in them. And I teach writing. I teach business writing. I'm big on how to proof. I have a book coming out in about 2 weeks, and I just realized this morning. They must have already set it up already. And I went, oh my God, there are 2 pages in there I do not want in there. And I panic wrote them this morning how much would it cost to, for me to change those 2 pages. Really, I don't, I teach proofreading, but I don't proof.
Well, so as a teacher, do you feel like you're teaching to who the kind of student you were, or like do you feel like that carries into your teaching at all, like what you would have
Oh,
needed?
absolutely. I teach the way I would want it to have been taught. I have ADD. I can't remember by the end of a paragraph. I can't remember the first part of the paragraph, and nobody knew that back then. I just thought I was stupid. So I mean, I was a businessman. I ran my own business. To me, everything was common sense. It just makes sense. I opened up the first full-time comedy clubs in Philadelphia in the 80s. And, to me, it was easy. That's what I was doing, what I like. Kids, the inmates were running the asylum, and, I could have 1 week Leno, and next week Seinfeld, Eddie Murphy, Jim Carrey, Ray Romano, just.
And that was that what was the name of the club? Was it the Laugh Out? No,
the Comedy Works.
the Comedy Works. Oh my goodness, that because I saw you guys did a reunion show at Punchline last year.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, and so that was in the 80s.
80s and 90s.
That's great. So it ran for 2 decades.
Yeah. It was great. I mean, it was such a party. It was 350 seats. We would sell out every show. It was the perfect time. It was so much. It was really fun. It was comedy, rock and roll.
Wow. All right. So I want to get back to that. Before we do, so take me through, because you're obviously, this is a dad podcast, and so I was interested to hear a little bit about your family. So I'm like, you have, what's your stat line, I guess, in terms of kids and grandkids?
Okay. So my oldest daughter, who was actually a step daughter, but I raised, she has passed away. She passed away a couple years ago.
I'm sorry.
My oldest stepson, who I met when he was 3, is now 59. My first biological son is, I think, 52 now. And then my 2 youngest are 30 and 29. So that's the kids. And the grandkids. My oldest son has 2 boys. My biological son has 2 girls. My daughter had 1 son, and the 2 youngers, they're both single.
Okay, wow. So you got a nice family there, and it's like I think in terms, so you were married, I would take it at least 1 time.
Twice.
All right, perfect. That's like, I think, and that's very, nowadays it's like I think everybody's from this sort of like, the Brady Bunch sort of hit it on the head at that point, where it's like now all of a sudden that was like, I think maybe the first in the era of, hey, let's normalize the reality of what's happening out there.
Yeah, I used to say when we would walk into a restaurant, all of us, nobody knew who belonged to who. Always my 1 son looked older than me all the time. I was actually a grandfather at 35, and I said I want him to call me Zeta. Zeta is basically for an old Jewish grandfather, and I thought at 35 it'd be kind of cool to be called Zeta, and it stuck on, and all the grandchildren call me Zeta now.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
I always like it when there's a word or a term or something, because I think with grandparents especially, there's like everybody has their different one. And I always joke that, like, for me growing up with having 2 moms at one point, it's very frustrating because my other mom in the 80s, it was not cool. I've been joking now on stage that I'm too old to have 2 moms. Like that's a new person's game at this point.
Great,
so like, because there was no other word for it. So it was just my mom. It depends who I was around. It was her friend, her roommate, my aunt. Like there was just a rotation of whatever socially acceptable word wasn't going to cause me to have a full TED talk at the grocery store, but in reality, I wanted, now for my granddaughter. So like, my dad is also gay. So, and he's in my life now, and his partner, they've been married, his husband, they've been married for 20 years. So like, my granddaughters call him Pop Pop and his husband Poppy, and so they have like a word, and I just love that because I think there's an affection there. You're creating a relationship, and it's just a word, but it's an identity too, and it's
Yeah,
kinda
and my mother, who is 98, her grandchildren, not my kids, but my sister's kids, all call her me mom. So and there was a mom and all that stuff. You actually had a mom. You know,
yes,
you added them up.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was like. That's what I do with the audience now. I'm like, that's 2 moms, 4 nipples, very confusing. But yeah. So I love having, and even like now, my daughters call my mom grandma, or I called my grandmother Grammy. I was like, there's all sorts of them. I love the terms because it allows the kids and whoever to create that connection. But that's you're like I said, I think you're the first time we've had someone who's
Yeah, you already said
grandfather.
that. You already said
Yeah,
that.
I don't know if we were already rolling. We might have been pre-roll. I don't know.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
You don't have to say that. It's not like I'm going to run over and do Philly's funniest now, but at the same time, it's nice there. I remember I was up it was at a Helium, and whatever I did, I gotta say, most of the time I go on stage, I do great. And I have to say that because there were plenty of times I didn't. But now, I have my thing, and I know, how to do it. And I went on in Helium, and I did my performance. I didn't think of myself as old. I know I'm older. And I finished. I got off, and I think it was John Drury, got on after me, and like the first couple jokes, nothing. And he went, "That old guy, you laughed at everything he said, but what a." It's not fair. And I'm going, I'm the old guy. Is that what I am? And, now I am. And all the guys that started with me, unbelievably, so many are dying. But we all kind of grew up together, although I was a club owner, the best compliment I ever got as a club owner, because I would go on stage too.
Yeah.
It was, by Marjorie Gross, a wonderful writer who turned to me during one show. She said, "You don't seem like a club owner." And I thought that was the nicest compliment that I ever received.
So now you have, a lot of children. At this point, your career was already in writing at that point? What were you doing when you were a young dad?
No, I did. Actually, the first time I ever went on stage, I think it was 19 in Yardley, Pennsylvania. And I was listed, my name right under, roast beef sandwich on the blackboard outside. And I wanted to be, I remember the day I said to my mother, I wanted to be a comedian. I think I was 19. And she said, that's 1,000,000 to 1 shot. And I went, that's the worst thing you could tell a kid, that you can't be. What you should say is, it's 1,000,000 to 1 shot, and you could be that one. That's exactly, how you would put it. And to me, I still chased it. I chased it for years. When I was out in LA at 21, I would go to the Troubadour, which is still a great rock and roll club. There were at that time, the comedy clubs had not opened. The Improv was more of a sort of a what kind of club? More of a coffee house type of thing. And then I came back here and I worked a regular job. And then I was coming back to Philly. I mean, I played in the Village, the Gaslight, and the what's the famous, the Gaslight, where they gave the name Gaslight to Mrs. Maisel, the club that she worked in, but it wasn't the real Gaslight. But that was one of the first ones I worked at. Bitter End, yes, and I worked at the Bitter End, and then it was Woody Allen was there, and Robert Klein, and those people. And then in Philadelphia, I started going. We didn't have a comedy club, and there was a consortium of comedians who I opened up the Comedy Works under a different name, it was Comedy Factory Outlet, and we had a falling out, and it became mine. and they opened up their own club, and that was sort of Philadelphia just exploded at that time, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun, and now that became my full-time job.
That's great. So you were having all this dream before getting married and have kids. So so like when you first got married, they knew what they were getting into, because I think that was something my wife had to deal with as like, 12 years into our marriage, and now all of a sudden there's this new adventure we're going on. So at least I think for you, that's good. That's good for them.
Yeah,
So
I remember at the Troubadour, I was 21 years old, and I came home, and I did great. I really did great. It was a different type of bit, but I did it. It was political, and I came in and I said to my girlfriend, who was going to become my first wife, it was great, and she said, "Oh, that's nice." And it was like, oh God, I don't have anybody. And I remember at the bitter end, my sister and my wife sitting in the front row like this the whole time. They were so embarrassed about me. But back then, in terms of when I was a kid, I would fall asleep every night watching Johnny Carson. And the first 15 minutes, which it was an hour 45 at that time, they had his monologue. And usually the first act was a comedian doing stand-up. And I would cringe when they did poorly. I mean, I felt what they must have been feeling at the time. And I always said I didn't know how to do anything else. I was, I'm told whenever I go back to a reunion, I was the funniest person in school. That was my defense. Humor was my defense. And what I used to do in class, the jokes that people would tell to me were so obvious, and I would never say them. And that's not clever, but they would get laughs. And what I would do is I whisper to my friend Bill Gaybauer what I thought was funny, and he would repeat it, and everybody would laugh. And then one time I told him what I thought was a funny reaction, and he said it and nobody laughed. And he said, "Well, Young told it to me." But so after a while, I started doing it myself. Yeah. And I guess, again, it was my greatest protection. My father died when I was 16. And, that was the mask I would wear was always humor.
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. So now then you're doing the comedy. At what point does the writing come in? I mean, obviously as a comedian, you are writing, but you then went on to write was it Leno as well as
for Leno, but for Boy Meets World and a number of other shows. It was really, I was managing a couple guys. I managed WID.
Okay.
At the time, because WID was, just starting, and I managed Todd Glass and actually gave Todd my material so he could go out on the road. So I was writing that way. I wrote my own material, and a couple guys I was managing, Meyer and Young, who went on to tremendous success out in Los Angeles. As first they were comedians, then they became executive producers of shows. Well, I just followed them out there. I still had the clubs running. I was running it by phone. We didn't have computers.
Yeah.
And booking that way. And my sister ran the Comedy Works at Jordine's, who I might add doesn't even book me anymore. It's funny. I started the club, and I've said to him, Mike, why aren't you booking me? And he would just laugh it off. And so it's really funny that the club I started, I can't play. It's like the books I write, I can't read.
So now, but you're writing for these people. You're out there in California. You're getting, and so at this point, are you married yet? What point do you get married?
Oh, okay. I got married when I was just turning 22. I divorced when I was about 26. I went out to Los Angeles. I had girlfriends in between. I went out to I'm sorry, I never went through my gay period. So still waiting. But I had girlfriends, and I went out to LA the second time, and I ended up meeting somebody and getting married, and that's where my last two kids came from. But while I was writing during the day, I would go. I was a regular at the Comedy Store
Mm.
at night. So I was still doing stand up until I decided I don't want to hang out at the clubs. I'm too old for that. And Dice Clay is getting on stage for an hour and a half and bumping me and being horrible, and I don't want to follow that type of stuff. So I lost the energy for that. And I came back here and continued to run the Comedy Works and getting on stage whenever I wanted to go on stage. And then pretty much, let's see, I went out to LA and I did that. And then I came back and I worked for a while regularly, and then I decided to go back into stand up. So that was basically it. But in between, I brought this here. I don't know.
The
It's hard
image,
to
the
see.
background is, the background's stealing it. What is that what I think it is?
This is the Gong Show trophy. I won on the Gong Show. I did a ventriloquist act. That was my big thing. I did a ventriloquist act. I was, and I had no idea how to do ventriloquism. I did a ventriloquism act with a rubber chicken, and I won. And I thought that was going to get me on Carson, but it never did. But in the meantime, when I knew I was aging out as a comedy writer, I started writing books. A lot of, I had my own radio show in Los Angeles. I wrote for the New York Times, LA Times, Philadelphia Inquirer, mostly satire. I was a political editor of National Lampoon, which, if you're not familiar, that's a predecessor to The Onion. And so a lot of political stuff. In fact, as I say today, and I'm crossing my fingers, I am up to open for Al Franken at the City Winery. I'm supposedly, that's what the guy told me. So,
wow, that's exciting.
Oh, it is exciting because Al is in one of my books. I interviewed, my book Great Failures. I interviewed a lot of high profile people, and Al was one of the first people I booked, and I was so excited to interview him. And it was the most boring interview of all the interviews that I had. but we got along really well. In fact, we were on the same radio network, and he was my first guest on my radio show. And I said, "You ought to get your own radio show." This is before he said, "Nah, I'm never going to do that, and I'm never going into politics." And that's funny. But I wish I would have known that prior to writing the book. It would have been nice to have been able to stick all that stuff in there. Okay, so I did all that stuff, and then I also, needed to make some money, so I started also teaching and doing seminars.
We'll be back right after this message.
Seriously?
Hey, fans of Seriously Dad, we want to let you know that we have a live podcast opportunity come up. We're doing a comedy show. We're doing a live recording. And when better, the eve of Father's Day, June 15th. June 15th, this year, we're going to be at Soul Joel's in Pottstown, Pennsylvania. Tickets are on sale right now. Go to souljoels.com for June 15th, 8 p.m. show. It's going to be me. It's going to be Albert Davis. We got Neil Wood from Drop 10 Media, our producer. We got special guests coming. We're going to have a great time. So get this for the father in your life. If you got a father, if you have a father, if you want to be a father, if you're not a father, get those tickets, souljoels.com. We'll see you on June 15th.
Seriously, Dad? Seriously? Seriously?
Yeah, that's great. No, and do you think because you were like writing and doing some of those things and it wasn't like a typical 9 to 5, did that help with a family balance, or did you feel like it was hard to balance?
Oh, I was, and I continue to be a great dad. And when I say that, I mean they think I'm a great dad. I make the appearance of being a great dad. I don't believe I am, but all of them, even the stepkids are my kids.
Yeah.
And it's nice. They all, constantly are contacting me, except the younger ones. The younger ones are a little bit um, I think the other ones grew up at an age where they, oh, you're supposed to respect your dad. And now the younger ones, which 29 and 30, question my authority.
Yes, I guess that would make sense too, especially with the difference in ages of like that's like almost a 20-some year.
Oh, yeah, but
the
it
youngest.
was nice when they were little kids, the younger ones, the older kids played with them like they were.
Yeah, that's true.
It was great to see. It really that there was still, there was a relationship with the older ones and the younger ones, and it's and we'd have. When I had my house in Langhorne, everybody would come in, for the holidays and for any particular special occasion. And, it was a regular basis for everybody getting together. Although my oldest son lives in LA. He has a musical production company and a licensing company. And my son lives in New York. He's a social worker in New York. Or social worker or administrator or something like that. And then the other ones the two other ones live around here. So we don't get together as much as we did before. And
that's harder to wrangle all of those together when you're on each coast as well.
It's really hard to get out to LA, which I keep trying to do to see,
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. You said like I'm a great dad, and by that I mean, they think I'm a great dad. I was
Yes.
I'm even today, like I'm playing with my daughters. Fortunately, I had Sunday free. I feel like a lot of times now because I'm teaching during the day and then I'm going out a lot at night now that I've gotten a little bit more guilt for myself personally of like, I'm not there for nighttime a lot. And so like, I'm starting to get a little guilt. It's like today, my daughter wanted to play dolls. I'm like, oh, the minute she said, I promised myself if I'm around and she asked me to do something, I say yes. I don't even know. I'm trying to play Barbies. I'm like, I think she'll remember this. Is this going to be a memory? And I'm trying to, I'm trying to like play tag with these Barbie dolls with her.
You're making an investment in the future. You're not actually playing so that they can have fun at that moment. You have to categorize it as, will this be something that they'll finally remember? If not, maybe I should just move on and do 20 minutes.
It's funny because it's one of those things that now it's like I'm trying, we're balancing this thing. And I try to do like I'm coaching my daughter's baseball team, and because I'm trying to find that balance, because that's one thing my mom always told me in life. You can work hard, play hard. You got to have a balance of those things. And, I'm grateful for my wife because she's like very regimented with scheduling. So we have like a Google Calendar with everybody a different color. And, it helps because then if somebody says, hey, can you do this show or can you come do this? I know I can go in and look right away and know if that's even a possibility or not. So
man, that's the hardest thing I have. I have so many responsibilities and trying to do comedy and trying to write, and it's
only so many hours.
It's really difficult because every time anybody says, can you do something, I have so many things I have to check, and I'm not perfect, so I botch it up sometimes. But yeah, I get that idea. It's difficult to keep everything in line so that you're not actually just panicking from one place to the next.
Yeah. Do you feel like you had times kind of like with comedy? You mentioned like, you feel really good now, but there was a time when you didn't. Do you feel like do you have that same feeling as a dad or a granddad? Like there were a time when you were like, you know what, I was sucking it up right here, but then I got it. Like, did you feel like that was the same thing for life? Like as comedy?
I went to, for the most part, I work for myself, and I, like my youngest son, I went to every practice, not only the games, but I went to every practice. And I was out there, trying to, earlier in the games, or I would go, to, the yard so you can shoot some baskets and that stuff. And even my older son, I remember being an umpire at his little league games. So yeah, whatever they had a thing, I was at.
Yeah, I think that's my goal. It's like I just got to be intentional. When people say to you, "Oh, how do you do it all?" I just say, "Well, I'm just trying to be intentional with my time. And so like if I have a show here and I have this here, but then I better also be having something that I'm like, I took a day off and did the Girl Scout trip to New York City. It was like me, a bunch of Girl Scout moms, and a bunch of Girl Scouts on a bus. And the bus driver's like, "Hey, everybody's got to sit down and pee, even you, big guy." Apparently in the bus, and it's true. You should not try to stand. I did, because screw him. I'm not going to sit on the potty. But it was a rough ride trying to pee upright and then not piss all over the seat for the rest of the girls. So. But I think that's So I was curious about how you felt with the balance, especially if you're having so many kids and over so long. You can't be everything to everybody. I feel like sometimes I have to consider too.
Yeah, it's funny. When I got married, so I was 2, and I had kids who were in school by then. I mean, I'm 22. I had kids in school, and I joined the PTA because I became vice president of the PTA in Levittown. Because I thought that would help me in politics, and even at 22 years old, and all I found out was like I was head of the pie sale. That was it. It wasn't very much in politics back then. I wanted to be, because I was kind of I would say a voracious liberal at that time, and angry. About Vietnam and things like that. So, So but I was, I don't know. It was just, this is what you had to do. This is, the funny thing is, I at the same time, I was an alcoholic and never drunk. Just, I drank every day. And I mean, I'm sober now for like almost 35 years.
Wow.
But even with that, there was never, first of all, my kids never saw me drinking at all. In fact, I would take them to the AA meetings. So.
Oh yeah. They have that program Al-Anon, right? Isn't there? So there's a program.
Al-Anon, I guess it would be that too. I don't think I had any of, certainly not my kids or my wife or anything like that, being having to go to Al-Anon. I was never. It
never got to. Well, that's great, because I know for a lot of that's, and the fact that you talk about it. You talk about it in your act at all, or?
Yeah. Oh yeah, a little bit. In fact, I was even adding up. Like the line I say is, I had to get sober because one night I got so loaded, I walked into an Olive Garden and I thought it was an Italian restaurant. So, and I talked about it. And today I was writing, I said, I'm going to go further with that about how, people applaud when I say I'm 35 years sober, and I'm going like, great, you're applauding for me not having anywhere to go for a sense of relief. I am on edge all the time. I have no fun at all. And this is for 35 years. I have to go through this crap, and you're applauding. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. That's funny. Yeah. I mean, I think it's important too. I think talking about, I don't know, for me, I felt like just now it's like, it was so freeing once I've decided to get on stage and talk about some of those things, because I feel like that's what people want. Real is funny. People, we all are going through some of these things, and to see someone build tension and break it, it gives everybody the relief that I think we're all there for.
Yeah, I think, although I have to say, for my comedy is just silly. And I'll do it about anything. And in fact, the other night I was at a gig and I said, I'm going to try this. I'll try something out. And I was in the middle of doing, spinning off of everybody else's material. And then I stopped and I got in front of the microphone and to the audience I go, what are you laughing at? These guys did all the work. I'm just standing up here. They wrote all this material. I'm changing a word at the end. That's what I'm doing. And you're laughing at that. And while I have ruined their craft, while I'm doing this, you guys are stupid. I mean, I broke the fourth wall.
Yeah.
And went out and sort of explained, and they were hysterical. It was, and then you start to, whenever the audience is with you, that's where the ad libs come, because you, in your head, you're going, they trust me. and then you get to trust yourself, and then you've opened up that right part of the brain where if comedians get together and they're all trying to top one another, and stuff is flowing out. Just I remember Andy had his birthday. It was a surprise party, and we're there. And Missy Hall found out she had cancer, and I think it was me, Jay Black, and a couple other people. We were standing around doing all these cancer jokes and they were just rolling. They were just pouring out of our mouths. And I said to Missy, I said, you got to have a pen. You got to write all these down. These are, and she has used all those because you're now with people that you trust. And so, and again, you end up trusting yourself. And there's a friend I used to have who passed away, Judy Toll, very funny comedian, was part of the Groundlings, and she started at my club. And even when I would just leave a message on her answer machine, I could do 20 minutes because I knew when she would play it back, she'd be hysterical. You know, you know what I mean? So even with her not there, I knew she'd be laughing. So that freed me up to just keep on going. And sometimes when I do this thing that I do, on other comedians' acts, which I think is part of the reason I don't get booked. I think a lot of comedians are not thrilled that I do that. Nobody tells me that, but I know what you're saying. I feel like because you said it when you said in breaking that fourth wall, but at the same point, like I've watched, it works. Like it's undeniable. Like I've never not seen a whole crowd uproar. Like there was a level of a decibel you didn't think people could hit if you had watched the comedians up front, and then it's there. So it works. It's an act that works, and you've got them, you're trusting them, and like you said, then once you have that trust, it's like you're just taking batting practice. I wish I had a pen up there to write some of the things down that I'm saying. I go after I'm finished, I go to my girlfriend. Do you remember what I said after this and what I said after that? Because
you don't record yourself.
Not you.
I at least audio record everything.
Yeah, that's right. I said to you that one night. I said, "Don't you already know what you do?"
That's right. You did say that.
Yeah.
Well, even last night I said so. I don't remember what it was now. I got to go listen back. But I had ad-libbed something. I did a second show after my first one, and I was like primed up and feeling really good. And I ran into this other club down the street and did a show. And I was like, and I added a new tag that I'd never thought of before. And I don't even remember what it is right now, but I know I just said to myself, oh, my hour ride home after this, I'm going to listen back. And because that's the thing is like, there's just so much there I need to, pay attention to. Because even now, like I started doing some like charity stuff or even like retiree luncheons, and like that's a different beast. It's like I was talking with Chris Kosha about it too, and he's like, you got to throw fastballs down the plate when you're doing some of those gigs that you can't riff or you don't know. I might not have their trust. Like I did a luncheon for these retirees on Thursday afternoon, and in the middle of this 30-minute set, I lost them with the mom stuff. I lost them. Like I had them for a second. They were okay. And then they got real quiet. And then I put it kind of back on them as like, there are a lot of LGBTQ issues in schools right now. And I had a table that like clapped. I said, so it's, and then I pivoted back into like, so I can't raise my kids the same way. And I won them back. But like, there was a moment there that I was like, oh dude, you're getting paid some loot right now. You cannot lose an audience like that. But
well, it's funny that you say that because a lot of comedians will talk about how bad the audience it was if they're not doing well. And Leno said to me when I asked him, how do you feel? He said, I feel that I am being paid to make them laugh. And if they didn't laugh, it's not their fault. It's my fault. Whereas one day I got off stage and do you know who Elaine Boozler is?
Mm-mm.
Okay, Elaine was a very successful comedian, at top of her game, and she was a star. And Elaine, she used to live with Robin Williams. She lived with Andy Kaufman. She started back with them, and
oh wow!
And I came off stage one time doing something kind of bizarre, different than what's here out in L.A. And she said to me, "That took balls." And I took it as a negative kind of to do that crap. That's how I was finishing the sentence for her.
Yeah.
And the next morning, she called me up and said, you seemed a little distraught. And I said, well, you said that took balls to do that. She said, I meant Andy Kaufman balls. And I said, what did Andy say when he bombed? The opposite of Leno, Andy felt that the audience bombed. And I thought, how confident are you in yourself that if the audience isn't laughing, you're standing up there going, they just don't get it. What I'm doing is good. And he in effect bombed a lot, but his commitment to what he was doing did not stop him. But that's really interesting. Back and forth. Is it the audience? Is it you? Certainly, I've worked in front of audiences that did not, and usually they're very old. That they just don't get what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, you're right. I think there's a commitment level when I see acts that have a certain stance or a certain angle that they're not willing to back down. I've been doing some work with other instructors at like a comedy school sometimes, just offering sometimes feedback. And I'm watching some of these comedians who are more darker than I am. And like a lot of times I have an admiration for that because I'm just not willing to, but like to have somebody who's confident to know that this is what I want to do. And I'm doing something, and hey, I might go up there and I might eat shit today because this audience might not be in the mood for that. There's something to be said. I have a great respect for anybody who does that because I don't have the self-confidence to not go up there and feel like I want everybody to be able to laugh. But when you stand out like that, I feel like you reach a decibel of laughter when you get the right crowd that maybe I could never reach.
Oh, I don't know. I never reached it before. There were times that I did really good. I mean, obviously, I what's her name, Mitzi Shore, made me a regular at the comedy store. But I have to say that there's nothing better. There's nothing. It's my medication. It's my vacation. When I'm up there doing it, I'm saying to myself, "This is so great." You know what I mean? It's like it's like when I wrote for TV and I worked for a season with Betty White and there were a number of other stars that would be on the show, and then stars would come in to watch Betty. They would be in the audience, and I remember Carol Channing calling me over to talk to me and tell me, and all I was sitting there was going, I wouldn't listen to a word she was saying. I was just saying, she sounds just like Carol Channing. And I never lost the awe. I never thought, it's no big deal. We're in the business, we're stars or whatever. I always thought in terms of this is so neat.
That's when I first met you and I saw the credit for like Boy Meets World, like that was my childhood. Like that for me, like that was towards the end of me getting into my preteens and stuff. But like I loved that show tremendously. I would watch if it was ever on, even if it's still on.
It's a good show.
And they do and some of the cast does a podcast.
Yes.
That like, and I had huge crush on Daniel Official. I mean,
really, that's so odd.
Topanga. Oh my goodness.
No guy's ever said that. And she looks the same as she did when she was like 14.
Does. It's amazing. There's something about that show and the way that it was Ben Savage lead, like that, the way he was just like the kid that
I thought Ben Savage was going to be the next Albert Brooks. I just felt he had that dry delivery. And I tell you, it was a great cast. And there was great producers on the show. And, when I'm proud of other things, but that one is like, it has now become my first credit whenever I get up on stage, because I know that most of the people there watched it when they were growing up.
I mean, because it delivered. It was like, it was right at like after the whole Full House era and things like that. But like this to me just spoke to me because there was lessons when he's out in the backyard and Feeney's in the garden there and they're kind of wrapping it up like, that was great. Or even just the way they would deal with certain harder issues that that were very reminiscent of how you would deal with things in the 90s. It was just great. I loved. And then the cool Mr. Turner, the cool teacher comes
Yeah.
in. Like,
Oh,
I mean,
yeah, right. I forgot.
yeah, I mean, it's like, as someone who's now a teacher, like, I feel like a lot of the relationships I saw in that were the kind of relationships that were emblematic that what people remember from school, they remember from their teachers,
It's funny for that show. Almost every show I did that was a family show, I would pitch two different stories. One was the young kid gets drunk, or number two, they find a gun in his locker. And luckily, one of them actually was a show called The Smart Guy, where they used him getting drunk, and I won an award for that, and a Humanitas nomination. But I always was looking for those things of what would be the thing that would, and Boy Meets World did a lot of it. I wrote a show, it was in Boy Meets World, called Uncle Daddy, where the oldest one, the good-looking kid, he's on the podcast.
The Ryder Strong?
No. Ryder plays.
Will Friedle? No.
Yeah, Will Friedle. He fell for a woman who was older than him and had a kid.
Yes.
And I wrote that one, and that was, to me, where that's a little bit odd. That's off the wall. That's not in a family show where he's having, in effect, he's just a kid and he's having an affair with this older woman who has a kid. I think that I came up with the title Uncle Daddy, which I thought was that, to me, coming up with the titles, whether they used them or not, or anybody ever saw the titles and all, was part of the fun of doing the shows.
It's funny you say that, because like even when we're doing like this podcast, we're just like whatever. But like when I come out, like we're thinking about what the title is going to be. Like sometimes I'll create it and pitch it in the chat with the producer and Albert, but it's something. Yeah, you're right. There's something fun about the creativity. That for me is like this whole other world now of like writing. And I have so many people that, like, after hearing like some of my acts, something like that, would be like, "Oh, your life's a sitcom, man." I'm like, well, we're done. I think the sitcom era is gone, but I think
I believe the book that I just finished writing is a lot about that.
Because I think there's something there that's so fun and creative to tap into, like, oh wow, I have all of what I would have considered trauma. That's now like, but now it's like cool credentials. I feel like as someone who's a teacher, like, oh wow, like what are the big issues right now? Oh, well, it's special needs kids, or it's LGBTQ issues. And it's like all of these things that are now coming to the forefront in education, the things that nobody ever wanted to talk about before.
I also think as a teacher to the students, it makes you real.
That's it. That couldn't be more important to me. I want them. I tell them in the beginning of the year, like, I don't expect you to learn anything from me until you know who I am and what I'm about, and I think that's something that even now, like, I know there's kids that find this podcast. I had a kid bring up the emblem, the logo of the podcast, because Neil is an amazing graphic artist. So he came up like a really good, like, you can see some of the logo in the back, but like I had a kid just turn his Chromebook around and like, "Mr. Yoder, is this you?" And I'm just like, we're not talking about that right now. But I know, like, I even had some profile views and I was looking on my story on Instagram and I'm like, I know that name. So like, I know right now they're like finding me, but at the same time, I'm not doing anything I'm not proud of. Do I talk about it when I'm in class? No, because that would be inappropriate. But are they finding me? I'm sure they are. But you know what? At the same time, I think you're right. It makes me more real.
Well, the podcast where you got completely nude, is that something that the school district is having any problem with?
Well, it's under investigation right now of whether that's really me. It's just allegations at this point.
It was AI.
Yeah, right. Oh my goodness, that's changing the game. Like, it's because it's one thing to, there's always been an issue with things where people could lie and say something. I feel bad for that UConn girl. There was this girl, Paige, I think it's Beckers. She was like an amazing basketball player. She decided not go into the draft because she was eligible to stay in, because this class was crazy good. And then somebody leaked AI photos of her nude. And I'm like, now we're getting to a level now where people can just do, trolls in the internet can now have some kind of ammunition beyond just being in a comment section. So I hope karma and the world kind of resets itself a little bit with this AI craze.
Yeah, well, that's the big thing that everybody's dealing with now, and it seems like the trolls on any of the platforms, uh, they're equal to the truth.
Yeah.
And people want to grab onto that, and then it rolls and rolls, and then mistruths are a lot. I did something for the University of Pennsylvania where I did videos for one of their sites that was pointing out where politicians lied. I think it was during one of the Obama elections, and I went out and I got Richard Lewis and Rita Rudner and a lot of other people to do this, a couple of PSA spots where they talked about how we should be allowing politicians to lie. It's important for us. Why would we want to waste our time dealing with the truth? That's just too much work. What we want to do is make sure that we can take the truth and make it more entertaining for you by lying. And so, and it was the opposite, it was an opposite thing for that particular site. But yeah, I mean, politically, I know my son is just, he's 29, but he just hates like what we do in America with politics and, and health and mental illness. And, I was talking with, I forget what it was, whether it was Social Security or talking with insurance, Medicare or Medicaid or whatever. I was talking to them on the phone, and they were telling me what had to be done. And I said, how does anybody who does not have a PhD in investigative journalism, how are they able to cut through all this crap that is impossible to do, and that insurance companies will turn down immediately because they don't think you appeal? And you have to appeal and appeal to be able to get things across. And especially for the mental health field, it is so ill-equipped, and so many people and kids are spending their whole lives not getting the proper care and services that could help them to have a better life. And instead, they have to spend their whole life being miserable. And it's just amazing that these hoops you have to jump through would be, I mean, I'm not a college educated, but I have common sense, and I've been around for a while, so I and I write and I interview a lot of people. So I pick up on things, and I'm a bullshitter. So I can get through a lot of things with people, but I don't know how anybody, who is, growing up without, a highly educated background or family, how they can survive when, there's so many issues with so many people.
There were like three, when you said that, there were like three things that came to my mind. Because one, my mom's going through that, and she was a nurse, worked for insurance companies, worked for all that. And even she sometimes struggles, and she's got like all of those degrees. So like watching her go through that sometimes is incredible. Then I think about all the times that, my wife and I have to fight for our daughter with all of the things. And we've had, she has an ABA specialist that follows her in school, and we would apply for stuff, and they're saying, oh, just so you know, it's going to come back denied, and you're going to have to repeal. And they're like trying to help prep us for exactly what you said. And then the third thing that came to mind is my neighbor and I were just talking yesterday, because I know that he's a teacher, and I got home and I noticed he was already home, and I'm like, what are you doing home? And he's like, oh, I had a funeral today, and it was for one of his former students from like the class of 2015. And he's like, when it must have been something, he's like, I've gone to so many funerals and nobody ever says anything about what happened. And so, we're continuing to stigmatize and not normalize it. And he said in that class of 2015, there must have been 7 or 8 by now that have, opiates or whatever, mental health. And I think you're right. There's a clear issue with us not finding a way to make it, where everybody's been talking about it more and more, but I don't know we've gotten to a level where the system has caught up with it.
The interesting thing is what you just mentioned. I have a granddaughter who is extremely autistic, and she really isn't able to communicate. She's now 22,
Nonverbal.
and she'll repeat words that you say to her. She'll just
Yeah.
repeat it, and but she knows who I am and knows who they are, and has a big smile when I walk in, all that stuff. Every year she was in school, my son had to get an attorney to prove to the school board that she was still autistic. What? First of all, what did it cost the school board to have to spend money to go through these things when, how could you not think she's still autistic?
Yeah.
What happened that all of a sudden her brain rewired and now she is a normal child? I can't. And he is an administrator for social workers, so he knows the system, and he had to go through all that crap.
It's a gross misunderstanding of the people you're serving, and it's like, if we're talking about a free and public education, which is the cornerstone of American public schools, then how do you not know your population? And it's a shame, because now it is, at least I think, in the more forefront. So I think, unfortunately, people like your son had to be pioneers, and hopefully, and my family's reaping hopefully the benefits of how hard they had to work, because we're finding it, at least I think, an easier path now. But I think it's because of how hard people like your son had to work, to get your granddaughter through that. Because that's
I'm hopefully we're finishing up. I'm doing this with a physician, surgeon. It's called Demanding Compassion. It's a book about the medical industry and what they need to do in terms of instilling. They don't even teach it in medical school, which is, how could you not teach empathy and compassion? Yeah. At most, maybe they get an hour of it, and it costs money to not do it. It saves lives. It kills people to not do it. To not understand that this is something that would save the society billions and billions and billions of dollars if you just teach people how to treat, doctors and physicians, how to treat people as if they're people and not diseases. And it's, it's said over and over again, but it's so sad. And again, I taught, I did a lecture at PCOM, and to call me in to do a lecture on compassion is such a joke. Who am I to tell these medical students who have brains, that are 10 times the size of mine, that they need to do this? Why don't they have a class in that? Why don't they have those classes in high school about communicating, about having empathy, on how to deal with disagreements, how to be able to communicate in a way that resolves situations? We don't teach about how to deal with other people when we get out of school. That's what our biggest issues are, dealing with people. So that's why I like to end this comedy thing on a very hilarious note.
No, but I think, I agree. And I think that is an important note, because at the same time, I think what's going to make it easier maybe is, now that we're in this era of social media and there's so much written, instead of everybody just blurting something out and it going into the ether, now we have transcripts. Like, people, I'm sure, are studying comment sections of social media posts to understand how we're interacting with one another. And hopefully we can get to a level where we're teaching that kind of empathy. Because I was just watching, like, Erin Brockovich the other day, which I love. And there's a line in the movie where she's like, don't they teach lawyers how to apologize? Because you suck at it. It's just like,
that's what. I interviewed Erin for my book on great failures.
Did you?
She was a hoot. And I said to her, when you leaned over that counter and had your breast coming out so that you would get the clerk to get you a file, was that true? And she said, you bet. You used what you have.
That's right.
And she was a person that had a brain injury when she was a kid, so she wasn't able to do things on a higher intellectual scale. She did it on common sense and humor.
That's right. Well, and I think that goes a lot, even like with you saying earlier, like, oh, you think you don't get booked a lot because of the way you're doing it. But what you're doing is is hard work. Like when I'm watching you during the comedy show, and you're like you're voraciously writing the whole time, and that's a skill set that you're flexing a muscle, because you're like, oh, I got to be able to write this, I got to be able to perform this in the next 40 minutes potentially, and that's a skill set in itself. But I hope more people have empathy for that as well. So we've been posting out your, as we're kind of wrapping, we've been posting out your website and the book, greatfailure.com. So that's been up, posted for everybody.
And my new website that's just popping up is the LarryDavidCode.com. That's my new book. It's a novel, and it's based on a true story between Larry and me. But then it goes off the tracks, and it's bizarre, and I love it.
When I think of Larry David, I think of bizarre, so I feel like that's probably on brand.
I think of neurosis when I think of Larry.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's exciting. All right. Well, so we're going to make sure we put that in the show notes as well, and make sure everybody gets an access to that. You have any shows coming up you want to promote? This will probably be dropping next week, actually. So Mother's Day.
So let's see. May 25th, I'll be at the Comedy Cabaret in Doylestown. And let's see, next week I'll be at a bar mitzvah. The 2 weekends in January, June, there are 2 weekends in a row that I will be at the Comedy Cabaret in Doylestown. And I must just say, for me, thank God for Andy Scarpati, because he has really given me, my career, a second life. And we used to be competitors. I started Andy in the business.
Oh, wow.
And then we were a competitor. I got him his first club. I got him his first accountant, his first attorney. And then we were competitors and not pals, or not enemies, but not pals. And when I called him up to say a number of years ago, I want to try this thing out. And he said, come on up. And from that point on, he has booked me as a headliner there more than any other headliner over the last 5 years. So, thank you, Andy.
Yeah, and it works because it's proofs in the pudding. Anytime anybody goes to a show, they're going to get a different show every time from you.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's always a great time. So I've enjoyed working with you. I even told you last time, I was like, I would love to pick your brain even more. So I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to do that. And thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, one day we'll go out for coffee or lunch. And as I always say to you, tell people to book me.
And I will book this guy.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Stu. I really appreciate it.
Seriously, Dad?
Thank you for listening to the Dads. For once, give these daddies a break. And maybe follow, subscribe, like, and comment to the Dads on Instagram and YouTube at Seriously Dad Pod. Rate and review Seriously Dad Podcast on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Seriously, Dad?
Hey everybody, how you doing? This is comedian Neil Wood and
Adam Nutter.
We can't do it like that. You have to sound like a human being. That's insane. Because I'm realizing how little you're talking.
Adam Nutter.
I could just if you just want me to, honestly, you know what we need to do is you just need to get that clean.
Adam Nutter.
And then I'll just pop it in wherever I need to, bud.
Adam Nutter. Let's do that.
Come listen to the Cult of Us podcast. That's our promo.
Adam Nutter.
A Drop Tent Media Network podcast. Go to droptent.com or search Cult of Us podcast on your favorite podcast platform.
This has been a Drop Tent Media production.